Oh my God. Oh my God. Ridiculous. I've decided it's time to start on one of my dream projects, namely a big chunky wool winter overcoat. Only I don't have any fabric yet because I don't know how much I'll need. And I don't know how much I'll need because I don't have a pattern. Is this a legitimate way to make one? Let's find out. Eagle-eyed viewers amongst you will recognise these pattern pieces. Pretty much the only ones I tend to have much traffic with. The pattern for my suit jacket, which has seen a lot of action for as long as this channel's been up and about. So here's the plan. For this coat, what I want is one of those winter top coats that's essentially a kind of glorified, elongated suit jacket. It's going to have set-in sleeves, it's going to be padded, it's going to be built out, you know, with the canvas and everything. Basically everything that's going to go into the suit jacket is going to go into this coat as well, set maybe a dart or two. And the only difference is it's going to be bigger, it's going to be longer, it's going to be made of a thicker, coatier fabric. I figured obviously I could just draft a pattern from scratch, but then I thought, why bother, you know? I've put so much work into this one. With this one, I've gradually been able to take into account things like my sloping shoulders, the particular balance that is required in my case, so on and so forth. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it already works, why don't you see where else it could be put to use? So the fundamental idea is I'm just going to trace these off basically, then grade up the size, because obviously the coat will need to be larger than, for instance, an undergarment like a suit jacket that it would theoretically be going over, or a jumper or whatever I'm going to be wearing in the winter. Then I will elongate it, get rid of obviously this little curvy bottom here on the front panel, whatever, do all the style stuff that's necessary to change the shape in that fundamental way to achieve a coaty situation. I've already made some final tweaks to this pattern after the last jacket, so I've taken in those shoulders. You know, you may remember there were these weird peaky bits sticking out over my arms that weren't very neat. So I've sort of tapered in the armhole like that. Changed the balance here, so I cut across just above the top of the dart here and below the breastwelt pocket and sort of squeezed it in like that. Obviously nothing like so dramatic, just a centimetre or so, just to straighten out the front edge. One more thing which I think is the interesting bit is I've added to the side panel and the back panel just these little extensions here. So you can see that was the original line there, and I've added this sort of centimetre sort of splaying out at the back there, and the same on the back here. And what this is doing, I hope, is adding essentially drape both to the front of the chest and to the back around the shoulders. So I've mentioned before, I wanted ideally maybe to have a fuller cut in my suit jackets, a little bit more drape in the front, a little bit more fullness in the back to allow for more movement. This, theoretically, at least based on a random screenshot of a vintage tailoring book that I saw on Google Images, is going to achieve that. Let's see. Live and learn. So that's enough of a preamble. Let's get some tracing paper out, trace these off, and do what we're going to do. I think I'm going to start with the side and the back panels. Something's whispering in my ear saying that they might be a little bit simpler. Yeah, I've also never done this whole pattern grading situation before. I'm curious to see how it works out, because I think the idea is if you have a pattern and you want to sort of grade it up a size, you can't just elongate it by a centimetre all around, because proportionally that's not actually gonna, well, keep those proportions in check. Or at least I think that's the idea. So let's find out, shall we? Give it lots of room to breathe. Yeah, I'm sure you can hear the agitation in my voice and see it in my movements after the little emotional odyssey I've just been on with this SD card. But I guess I'm now in the sort of acceptance phase of the grief. And to be quite honest, it was only a few rather uninteresting minutes of me faffing around, as is my wont. So cool. Trace that off. Oh, isn't she a beauty? I'm using instantly in the same Winifred Aldrich metric pattern coating for menswear. I'm always going to remember myself the title. I'm going to go up by basically 2 sizes because firstly, I'd rather overshoot than undershoot with making this larger. This is already a relatively fitted suit jacket. And yeah, I'm actually quite happy if the coat ends up a little bit on the sort of baggier, sorry, not baggier, oh, God forbid, you know, more oversized end of the spectrum. That's fine by me. First, we are measuring horizontally from this point, in this case for 2 sizes, by 7mm, 4mm across, 1.5 up. So we're going to seem a little bit vague probably until I'm done. 8mm out here, 1.5 up again. The idea now is I'm just going to grade this up. And are you surprised to learn that I'm just going to freehand it? You know what? The old ways are the best ways. And this isn't looking very technical, is it? But all's well and good. Let me just mark what I've actually changed here. These are the new lines, something like that. So where at the waist point it was quite nipped in there, I've just sort of essentially straightened it out, and I'll match that on the back panel as well. So yeah, those are the preliminary changes. Adding a bit of height there, adding a bit of width. Hopefully that'll be enough to create the bigness that I want. Cool. Same drill, first and foremost. Yes. I don't know if you guys have ever made a overcoat like the one I'm kind of planning or have in mind. If so, like, what did you do pattern-wise? Did you draft your own? Did you do something akin to what I'm doing? Yeah, did you just have a commercial pattern that you used? What did you do and how did it go, I suppose? I'm very, 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 very excited to be using the fabric that I'm going to buy. It's definitely on the pricier end, but I figured, you know, for a garment that will hopefully stay with me for a long time and keep me warm basically through 4 months of the year, can't put a price on that, can you? Notches, bonus notches. I think that's everything. So this one's going to be a little bit more elaborate, but that's all right. We'll make it through. Up 1.5 centimeters, 1.5 here as well. Out 0.5. You can imagine that's going to be kind of the new neckline now. Out and then one up. Same here at the back pitch point. One out and one up. Half a centimeter out, one up again. 1 centimeter out, 1 centimeter up. Something akin to that. Wow, pretty egregious. Not my problem. Oh wait, cool. So there it is again, just outlined a little bit more clearly. Goodness me, some really atrocious freehanding here. But yeah, you can imagine this is, if I were to leave it like this, would kind of be the back panel for a suit jacket pattern of someone who is 2 sizes larger than me. Ugh. So my job now is just going to be to elongate these pieces. And I think I've calculated that I want to add roughly basically 60 centimeters, I think, in length, because I want it to be quite a long overcoat. I want it to go down below the knees. There's 50, and there's 10 more. So that will be the new bottom hem of the coat bottom piece, the coat side panel, sorry. Yeah, and I guess I just then need to scale it up like so. Something like that. Again, obviously, I'm going to test this and see if it actually makes sense. It might be that it just doesn't, and if it doesn't, then we'll go back to square one. But I have a sneaky feeling that this might just work out. Okay. Oops. Part of why I'm in such a rush to get this pattern done is so that I can order the fabric, so that I can handle the fabric, so that I can sleep with it by my side, dream about it. Because I don't know if any of you have ever handled tweed, like a really nice proper tweed, or just really any kind of really nice wool fabric. There is something about it that just cannot be beat. So yeah, okay, let's cut these out. There's something really wonderful always about being in the pattern phase of a project. Really nothing's going wrong yet, well, except for SD cards kicking the bucket. Nothing is fixed, nothing is determined. Everything is all kind of potential. You're just sort of languishing a little bit in that zone of possibility. If only we could languish there forever, but alas, at some point, something has to get sewn, doesn't it? Always forget you can do that. You know what? Farewell. Can't have dead weight in this atelier. Yeah, I'm really excited if I get the fabric that I've been eyeing up to show it off, basically. I think it's a real beauty. It's quite difficult finding tweeds that you know, can be delivered to wherever one is without having to pay an enormous amount of import tax and things like that. It's also quite difficult finding them in the appropriate weight. I think the weight I'm going to go for is something like, I don't know, like almost like 650, 700 grams per square meter, 22 to 23 ounces, which is quite a lot, I'm sure you'd agree. But live in Northern Europe, cold winters, all that jazz, you got to be ready. Cool, okay, so that's the back panel. I mean, already looking at it, I feel like this might still be a little bit too skinny, but we'll find out, won't we? Anyway, I hope you've all had nice summers. I certainly enjoyed mine. Any summer where I get to sew a suit is a good one. That'll do with me. Yeah, I'm still deciding on a few style features for this. So it's gonna be single-breasted. I'd originally wanted to do double-breasted, but I thought there's just gonna be too many individual headaches all at once. I haven't even made a double-breasted suit jacket yet. And there's inherent fit things that will change with that, even from my tried and tested pattern. For instance, with the extra fabric that you have in the front of a double-breasted jacket, that then essentially weighs the front of the jacket down, thereby affecting the front balance and so on. Didn't want to have to think about that while also thinking about, you know, enlarging it as I'm doing now in the case of the coat. But yeah, if this goes well, there will definitely be a proper double-breasted overcoat on the horizon once I've, you know, sold all my possessions to raise money for another ream of tweed. But yeah, it'll be single-breasted. I don't know what kind of lapel I'm going to do yet. We'll work that out as we go. Probably a bit higher than the suit jacket, just so my upper chest isn't bared to the cruel winds. I think it will have this sort of like, almost like 3-roll 2 button effect. We're getting a few weeks ahead of ourselves. Don't want to spoil all the surprises at once. Ugh. And I guess you'll see in the toile anyway. Okay, 2 out of 3. Okay then, now the main event. So for now I'm just going to trace off the current lapel shape, although that will change, I believe. Oh yeah. I'm very excited to see if my little drape experiment works in some way or another. Often when I start out doing these slightly improvisatory or half thought out, half baked pattern changes and whatnot, I sometimes think back to how I used to view it when I was first starting out making these kinds of things. There was this sort of excessive caution, wish to just make sure I was doing everything absolutely right, which, you know, makes sense, I would say. And honestly now, I'm just winging it half the time. And I can't say I'm wrong to do so, to be quite honest. Not that everything always works out, but I think at some point you just have to trust your experience and trust your instincts and give it a go. Let's see how sensible that is in this case. Oh my goodness gracious me. So let's get tweaking, starting here at this front, waist point. Naturally, I've just looked at the instructions and realized that I've confused horizontal and vertical, which I think in 9 out of 10 cases actually has made really no difference. And in the 1 out of 10, I'm hoping the difference will be negligible. Hands up if you expected something like this might happen, eh? Up 1 centimeter here at the roll line. And same here, 1.5 up. There you go. 1.5 out here, up here rather, and then 0.5 out. One out here, one out here, one up, one out here. Oh, whatever. I'm just gonna mark there. My notches are all over the place. It's all gonna change anyway. Is it? Should it? Well, none of my business. And then one out here, obviously. Okay, cool. Let me redraw these new bits. Again, allowing for the fact that this is all gonna go down straight, so this I'll freehand later, I guess. Or just do it now. Something like that. Yeah, true to the preparatory pedigree of this channel, my big pink highlighters run out, so sticking with pencil. In the end, it does rather look a bit like I've just enlarged everything equally around the edge, doesn't it? So maybe I wasn't being as clever as I thought I was. Don't want to end up with a smaller armhole. So another thing that's occurred to me is that the center front, so imagine maybe where the main button was going to go on the front of the jacket, I want that center front point to be in the same place, but I just want a more extensive jacket front, basically. Essentially a bit of excess fabric beyond that center front line, which you've got to imagine is the sort of ideal line along which both of the front panels will be connected, and it'll be running directly down the center of my own actual real life torso. Let's just extend that out by another centimeter for now. I think that's pretty good. And it only needs to be on the outside of the front and doesn't need to go along the top of the neckline there. And I'm going to keep the shape of the lapel. Actually, I think that's still quite nice. Again, at least for a draft, I can always change it. If I want to make it like a peaked lapel instead, I can do that on the final pattern. For now, I just want a basic toile that will give me an idea of how much of this gorgeous fabric I need to, by theft or bribery, procure. Cool. So same as before, dead weight, don't need it. 60 centimeters down. It's gonna have a flat front, and yeah, we'll just flare out nicely like that. Well, not like that, more like, you know, that. It's coming to my attention that this is probably not the most compelling piece of YouTube television. So hats off to anyone whose patience I've tested and who's passed the test. Let's say 3 centimeters flare there. Just angle all the way up. Yoink. And yoink. Yeah, I'm also considering doing maybe like a belt. Again, depending on how much fabric I can get. Might take care of some of the shaping. Good Lord, that is a chaotic sight, isn't it? So let me adjust the lapel situation. So let's say, I think I'm gonna have it starting up here. I think that's a good height to have it. With a lapel roll line, it needs at the shoulder point to be passing stitch line of the collar point about an inch outside of it. So for instance, if this is the stitch line of the collar point, 1 centimeter down, 1 centimeter in, and it's starting from down here, then it needs to be 2.5 centimeters. So going kind of like that. And that would be the roll line, basically. This is truly the scrappiest thing I've ever done, I think. Ooh, oh, great. This is certainly one of those moments where I truly, truly wish I had one of these massive sewing tables. I know I did a whole video about how you can get by in the smallest space imaginable, and that is definitely true, you know. That doesn't mean I can't grumble about it every now and then. Ugh. This whole time, I'm still kind of working on the perhaps rather arrogant, silent assumption that this will somehow work out. I look forward to trying on the toile in an hour or two and finding out that this is not just not working, but it's extremely far away from working. Okay, and there is the old front panel of what I hope will be a functional topcoat pattern. Let's get this cut out and test it. I do feel somewhat as though this bodes ill for the dream of having to buy, well, less than perhaps even 4 meters of this fabric. Don't really want to go into how much that would set me back by. I mean, you've got to bear in mind as well, I also will have a facing piece that I'll need to cut out, and of course, sleeves and collars, things like that, you know, little pocket patches. Trivialities, you might say. Perhaps I'll need to not have any inlay in this if I really want to be economical about it, but let's see. In for a penny, eh? That said, I think it's quite possible that if I put the side piece here, I could have the facing there, and then, yeah, back piece there, sleeves. I think that might work actually. 3 meters, 3.5 should certainly do it, which is kind of what I was conservatively budgeting for. Get thee behind me, Satan. What a miraculous job my darling shears have done there, eh? Ooh. 2 front pieces. Yeah, maybe instead of treating myself to a nice roll of Donegal tweed, I should treat myself to a new pair of these bad boys. Why not both? Non-financial answers only, please. Is this the least ergonomic cutting position in history? Might be. Human beings weren't born to cut fabrics like this, were they? Ugh. Alrighty then. We're getting there. Absolute carnage out here. Absolute carnage. Ooh. Oh, is that enough? Oh, that's gonna be tight. Oh, exciting. Ooh. Close shave. All right then. 3 meters isn't as much as it looks. Got no idea what's going on in the grain line of this, but it's not the kind of thing you worry about with a toile, is it? Well, unless you're a sensible professional person with serious aspirations to making fine garments. I never said I was one such person. Oy, oy, oy. The lackadaisicalness of my cutting, considering the expense of the fabric at stake, the fineness of the garment that this is all in aid of creating. Well, shame on me. Not for the first time. Oy. What do you say, Dante? What's your thoughts? Straight to hell with you. There we have it. Let's go get this sewed up, eh? I always forget what thirsty work that is. Okay, what are we doing here? Let's do fronts and sides first. This is the first action the machine's seen in a short while, actually. Oh, it's nice to be back on the open road. Yeah, I've often kind of said while doing my hand-tailored stuff on the suits that I kind of, resent having to use the machine every now and then, which is partially true, but then on the other hand, I come to miss the rapidity with which the machine sews. I think that's the beauty of putting together a sort of normal project, like, I don't know, a shirt or whatever. You just have that feeling of like, yep, step 1, step 2, step 3, you're really skipping through these constructional steps, if you like. And obviously with tailoring, the reverse is the pleasure in that it takes a long time to put things together piece by piece. But variety is the spice of life. What could that mean, I wonder? Whole inch difference. Yeah, if I were being really thorough, I obviously would have measured those edges to check they all still matched up after my tweaking and tapering, but I wasn't, I didn't, no biggie. And that's the discrepancy on the other half, about half a centimetre. Love that for me, lol. Didn't do anything especially scientific determining the vent point. Let's just do about that. I think that's about half a metre, maybe a bit more. Let's just see what it looks like, I guess. You can tell I'm excited, can't you? I'm not even checking if things are lined up. And even when I am, I'm not really. I actually have no idea if my adorable little machine is going to be able to at all sew through a fabric like the one I have in mind. Although maybe this can finally then be the oft-promised project that I do entirely by hand. Just when she and I were getting reacquainted. Again, I'm doing an awful lot of prognosticating about what may or may not happen once I actually start the project properly, but forgetting that there could still be a rather large amount of hurdles still to jump. All right then, shoulder time. That'll do, pig. The back panel shoulder seam is about 1.5 centimetres long on the front shoulder seam, so you just sort of collect the excess around the middle of this seam, and that allows for a nice little curve. Okie dokie. Let's give that a press, see how it looks. Oh my god. Oh my god. Ridiculous. When I first tried this on immediately after sewing it up, I knew I was going to have to put a whole weekend between me and it. Anyway, incidentally, I have now already ordered my fabric, and it turned out there wasn't really any point in me waiting, since I could only order in single metre increments, meaning either 3 metres or 4 metres, nothing in between. 3 was always going to be too few, 4 was always going to be more than enough. So yeah, I went with 4 after all. RIP my net worth. But never mind about that now. What needs to change? It's still too snug. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to widen all of the panels, so just kind of cut them down the middle. So on the front and back, the sort of middle of the shoulder line basically, and just expand them outwards by, I think, just 1 centimetre for those two, the front and the back. I don't mind having a wider shoulder, if anything, that's kind of what I want. And then with the side panel, I think I'm going to do a little bit more, maybe 1.5, maybe 2 centimetres. And that's just going to give me more of that room around the body that I want and need. And as far as the side panel changes is concerned, it's also going to help make that armhole a bit wider and a bit roomier. I mean, you can see me here wearing this jacket underneath, and obviously in the depths of winter, it might be that I'll be wearing big chunky jumpers. So there does need to be that extra space. And indeed, especially with the armhole, you can see there how high that is, how tight that is. There needs to be that extra space as well, that extra mobility, room for me to move around and, punch passers-by in the face, as is my want. So as far as lowering the armhole is concerned as well, which obviously also needs to happen, I think I'm going to go with 2 centimetres. Of course, I will do another fitting later on when I've actually cut out the real pieces and when I've canvassed it and everything, a basted fitting. And at that point, I can still trim away the armhole further if need be. But again, always better just to leave it in the pattern to start with and then cut away as required, rather than leaving too little in there and then, sellotaping little strips of tweed onto your precious panels. That's not going to work. I don't think. The neckline at the back is too high. I think I'll bring that down by about 1.5 centimetres, namely precisely the amount that I added onto it. Funny how these things work out. And the neckline is also generally a little bit too snug. I mean, you can kind of see there's a tiny little bit of tugging over the shoulders of what is already a jacket kind of based on this pattern. But beyond that, it's also following a similar neckline, similar collar line as this jacket itself. Obviously, it needs to be a little bit away from that, and needs to be a little bit wider to give room for whatever I'm wearing underneath, whether it's a jacket or a jumper or whatever, a scarf, and also just to have a nice big fat chunky collar put on top of it later on. On the front and back panels, I'll just taper that in and essentially kind of shorten the shoulder seam at the neckline there, just sort of stick it out a bit further, a bit deeper into the shoulder seam, if that makes sense. I think I'll lower the lapel roll line point just a smidge, and then also change the angle of the gorge line basically to sharpen it, so that if I do want to, say, turn up the collar if it's really cold and wrap it around my neck, it will kind of close in a horizontal fashion rather than sort of slanting down as it currently is. That will also allow me to add a little bit more width and size to the lapel. It's currently looking a little bit puny in this context, I would say. Lastly, I want to, I think, further accentuate that drape effect I was talking about earlier, specifically in the back panel, because I think there it would be really nice just to have kind of a really reasonable amount of excess. And again, I think it would be nice if in the back, especially above the waist, there'd just be a nice body of extra fabric that can billow a little bit. And especially now that I have had to order the 4 meters, I'm almost certain I'll have enough to make a little belt. That can help provide this sort of more casual shaping effect around the waist if I want it. And yeah, again, I think with this garment, I would rather tend for it to be a touch too big than too snug, because otherwise then it's just kind of pointless if I can't, you know, have all my other winter layers on underneath it for when it gets really cold. I think the vent point probably wants to rise by maybe just sort of 5 centimeters or so. Kind of so it's basically starting where I guess the bottom of one of my suit jackets would end. So kind of just at the bottom of my bum basically. And speaking of things rising or falling, goodness me, it's a little bit too long, isn't it? Slightly vampiric effect going on here. I think I probably over-egged it a little bit in my head. I think something that comes down to just below the knee rather than, you know, a whisker above my ankle is more tasteful in this situation. So I think I'm gonna raise that hem all around by 10, if not 15 centimeters basically. So sort of 4 to 6 inches. Overall, I think my grading tactic has added a few more wild goose chases maybe than perhaps would have been necessary if I just isolated the specific parameters that did need changing, such as above all kind of the width of the garment and of course the length, rather than sort of doing this everything expanded on all points kind of approach. But once I've made these tweaks, I think I'm gonna have something good to work with here. So I'm gonna go now and count the sleeps left until my tweed arrives. And in the meantime, you can watch this.